Hello, dear friends, and welcome back to the Learning Future podcast with me, Luca Parry. Today, I am pumped because we get to speak with Dido Balla, who is an amazing speaker, educator, and entrepreneur. And Dido and I were really lucky to meet in Israel earlier this year. He's the head of education for the Goldie Hawn Foundation, and he's focused currently, amongst many things, but it's to maximize the impact of MindUP in schools, communities, and families. And he'll tell us a bit more about that today. But beyond that, he really is on a mission to make the world a happier, healthier, and more fulfilled place. He, of course, is an educator, has a master's degrees of science in secondary education from Hopkins University, and has 7 years experience as a high school teacher. But he's also a bit of a hustler because he founded a non-profit organization called FitLit, whose mission is to blend curriculum, fitness, and literacy to empower youth. He's an experienced brain trainer. He's impacted thousands of parents and educators. I've heard him speak. He's compelling. He's a really good man as well. Dido, bienvenue. Welcome. Great to have you here.
Merci, mon frère. I appreciate it, brother. I cannot wait to dive in. This is one of those long overdue part two of our conversation. So Israel feels like it was years ago, but we hit the pause button. So thanks for having me to hit resume. I'm in it.
It's been a nice pause, bro. Busy pause, I'm sure, for both of us. But tell us. Well, question one, because that trip for both of us to Israel, where we contributed and looked at the social emotional learning field, which we both are part of, pretty profound learning for us there. What's something that you're learning at the moment in your life, in your work?
Yeah, I mean that trip was interesting because it allowed me to go to a place where the everyday dangers for some folks are so real that they really don't know if they are going to see the day, the sun of the light, the lights tomorrow from the sun. And I was wondering how people in those kind of circumstances can use what we know about the brain, what we know about things like breathing. You and I both talked about the importance of taking a breath, and I was very curious about the juxtaposition between something as simple as taking a breath and something as complex as conflict, war. And the feedback I got was amazing because essentially I heard directly from folks who are experienced in fearing for their life daily that the power of breath is the difference between somebody breathing and remembering what to do when they hear the siren, what to do when they see people running around, what to do when there's a bomb coming, and the other person not knowing what to do because not taking the breath and jumping into the reaction may lead into making mistakes and perhaps getting hurt or hurting others or not making it home that day. So for me, that was very powerful to confirm that something as simple as mindfulness through your breath, which we all have as long as we're alive, was that powerful. So that takes me to what I've been thinking about more recently, which is, consciousness is interesting because I argue that human beings are almost addicted to wanting to take credit for the things that happen to us or around us. And I'm reading an amazing book around consciousness, and it turns out that most of the things that have happened for the past million years and for as long as you've been alive in your brain happen without you knowing that they're happening. And the consciousness is only 10% of it. So you inviting me to this podcast, us having an amazing conversation, we can try to take the credit, but the things that led to that are a mix. It's a cocktail of events and circumstances and random things that we will never understand.
Yeah.
And then there's just a little bit of quote unquote agency from us. And recently, I'm just fascinated about that idea of the 90%. I'm just generalizing here, the 90% subconscious and what's happening under the hood without us knowing versus the small 10% that we are aware of, and yet that's the one that takes the credit. So that's where I'm at these days, man.
I love that, Dido. I think, oh mate, it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from Jung, which is that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will drive our life, and we will call it fate. And that's this piece around any transformation, which is really the theme of what we've been talking about in this season, anyway. but to be honest, for most of my life. Like, how do we change? How do we evolve? How do you innovate? How do you create value? How do you kind of find human, the real humanness in a system, in a relationship and connection? Bro, that's beautiful. This piece on like life being an intricate, balance of chance and choice. And of course, we either think it's all chance or all choice, but it's never. It's like something super emergent as a property. Mate, tell us more about this, because you can really inhabit multiple worlds here. From the education perspective and transforming that, from the social emotional learning, even from the neuroscience perspective and the work you do with MindUP. But this piece around consciousness seems to be something that's finally becoming a mainstream conversation, and it helps that Nobel laureates are determining non-local realities in physics and stuff like that, and that's got some pretty influential impacts for the way we think about the world, right? We think about even this reality. That's a big question, bro, but like, take us
it's
anywhere.
okay. Yeah, let's go with it. I mean, there are many ways to look at it. So let's start with what we do with MindUP. So at MindUP, we start with the importance of neuroscience, and we think that every single kid in the world should have a basic understanding of how the brain functions. They don't have to be neuroscientists, but something as simple as understanding that those behaviors that kids exhibit every single day, which are often mislabeled misbehaviors,
Yeah.
all those are ways in which a brain that is healthy and which is evolving properly is showing up in actions. So there's a lot of power in a kid understanding that, there's nothing wrong with me. I am not bad because I felt angry when somebody took my pencil. I am not bad because I yelled when I felt shocked by the fact that there was a test and I wasn't prepared for it, or I failed. I am not a bad kid inherently for wanting to skip class the day when we were supposed to have a presentation. There's nothing wrong with you. All that's happening is there's something that happened around your environment that triggered your brain and made you go into that fight, flight, freeze mode where your defense mechanism showed up and perceived that it was safer for you to skip the class and stay home, safer for you to yell at somebody. And the more you can understand that, the more you can do something about it. So it goes back to the point you made about Jung's quote. If you raise the subconscious into the conscious a little bit, then you have a little more agency and you realize, okay, there's nothing wrong with me for having had that reaction. However, is there something I can do to perhaps influence the way in which I react so it's a little more productive for me and for folks around me? So that's the basic level of what MindUp does with kids all around the world,
Yeah,
because
great.
every single kid should know about at least to a small amount, a small degree, how their brain works. So that's one. Then you start to think about, well, you can think about the brain as having three parts: amygdala, emotions, prefrontal cortex, high order thinking, hippocampus, memories. But the truth is, it's not that simple. It's very, very complicated, right? And I love this. I love it because the more I learn about the brain, the more I realize that we really don't know anything. We really just don't.
Wow.
And as a lifelong learner,
Yeah.
I am excited every time I realize, yo, we thought we understood, but we don't. So it turns out our brains is a network, right? There's no separation between parts that only focus on one thing or two things, and they're always talking to each other, right? And so much of it is unknown that I'm fascinated by the exploration of what we don't know. So let me kick it up a little bit from the MindUP level. So MindUP, kids understand the brain. You have your thinking brain, prefrontal cortex. You have your amygdala and emotions. So you always want to be in your prefrontal cortex because you think. But if we go a little north of that,
Yeah.
you're going to flow, right? Because flow
Nice.
is north of consciousness. So whereas on a foundational level, you may think that it's always good to be in the thinking part of your brain. The truth is, the times when you feel and perform your best are when you are north of the thinking and you aren't thinking at all. You are performing. That's when you're surfing the perfect wave. That's
Yeah.
when you can write for hours. That's when you get into a trance and you give a speech, and 30 minutes later, you don't know what happened, and everybody's giving you a standing ovation. That's when you improvise on the piano and you don't
Mm.
understand how you perform, that it's almost as if you were watching somebody else, but it was you. So it's that north, that state north of consciousness, north of thinking, I'm fascinated with these days.
Mate, I'm me too. I mean, the whole piece on like, and this is a technical term that I've heard as well, but the idea of like, I think it's called transient hypofrontality, which is the idea that it's like your prefrontal cortex is totally on board when you're in your executive function mode, where you're like, you're the CEO, you're directing things, but then there's this transcendent nature to the whole idea. I mean, I like Stephen Kotler's work on this. Effortless effort is what flow is. It's like, it's this idea that you become selfless, things feel timeless, um, they feel rich, and they feel effortless. This kind of STIR is that acronym. And I just think there is something about our work in
Yeah,
not,
yeah, I
not
love.
just not just schools, not just
Yeah.
workplaces, but just
Mhm,
life, because of the
mhm,
correlation between the more flow a human being
mhm.
experiences in their life and their level of fulfillment or meaning. And so I really do think if the purpose of education is anything, it's to help cultivate states where we experience flow in our uniqueness.
Yeah.
And of course, like, how do we do that is the next question. Well, there's certain conditions that we need, there's certain pedagogies that we need, certain curricula that are important, but that I think is I mean, imagine not experiencing flow in a school experience for a year. I mean, that's in my view so contrary to what we're learning from the sciences of performance and optimal learning.
Yo, bro, I have goosebumps right now listening to you. And let me tell you why I have goosebumps. I have goosebumps because you said, imagine not experiencing flow in schools. If you ask the question right now to most educators, is flow being experienced in most schools?
Mm.
As far as I'm concerned, and the answer is no. It is
Mm.
not being experienced.
Yeah.
It's not. It should be, but it's not. I just had got goosebumps because the goal should be flow every day,
Yeah.
because that is how you get to the better version, the best versions of those kids. And let's slow down on what you sped through that very important acronym, right? The STIR.
Yeah.
So the STIR is the acronym for flow, which is a state of altered consciousness when you feel and perform your best. So S for selflessness, T for timelessness, E for effortlessness, R for information richness, right? So
Mm.
so that's key. We can orchestrate that. Like, if you explain this to a teacher,
Yeah.
would you not want your students to feel the sense of selflessness as they are performing or engaging with the work? A sense of timelessness, not worrying about when am I going to be done? When do we stop? It's a feeling of effortlessness. It is easy to produce this. And then information richness, it's almost as if somebody else is like giving you all the little nuggets that you need. Everybody should want to feel that way. But two things come to mind. Number
Yeah.
one, I feel extremely grateful that I get to experience flow when I work,
Yes.
because I was having dinner with friends a few months ago, and I explained this with all excitement. And around the table, everybody was like, yeah, I don't know the last time I experienced flow. And I
Wow.
couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. So I feel like we belong to a small category of folks who get to experience flow every single day. It's not given for everyone. And
Yeah.
number two, back to schools. I don't think schools are doing enough to leverage flow, and it's a mistake.
Damn. Dude, I feel yeah, we're so aligned on this. I feel like the question I always ask is, what's the young people's experience? And then also, what's the educator's experience? Because what's the human experience within the human system? And so if you sit down with teachers, and this is a question I'll ask in some of my upcoming work. Well, and I do ask it anyway, but when's the last time you experienced flow, even micro flow? What was that context for you? Because if an educator is not experiencing that in a given week, then the system is completely demeaning or diminishing their true potentiality to inspire and equip and direct and guide, like all the beautiful things we know from the learning sciences about what matters, right? But I do sometimes think, Dido, because I'm kind of like a scientific artist, I guess, bit of the juxtaposition, a nerdy athlete. I kind of think these kind of terms. But the idea, it's not just the exclusive domain of the arts, flow. And I think sometimes we oversimplify it. Whereas I do drop into flow playing music or flying down a thing on a skateboard or a snowboard or whatever. But there is something about just the like staying with problems longer, which is this beautiful Einsteinian quote. It's like, the bell goes. And I remember when I was a classroom educator that this happened, I swear, like on 5 occasions, maybe, where the bell goes, no one moves, nobody, because everyone is dropped into an experience at such a level of depth and inner motivation that kind of these external organizational devices like school bells, which, we questionable if we should even have, but, those don't have an impact because people are inherently in the experience. It's like the time dilation, like Michael Jordan's beautiful quote. It's like, Michael, why are you so good at b-ball? And he's like, it's like everything else fades into the background and everything is moving in slow motion. Like that is such a beautiful description, I think, of this experience that we are trying to gift to ourselves and to our fellow human beings through experience design. And that in schools, at least, is kind of around pedagogy and awareness and understanding. And yeah, I just wonder that, and we are in a small group, I think, that have tried to align our work lives to this experience, Dido. But I feel like that if that's not the future of work, I'm not sure what is. How do you cultivate uniqueness and richness in the way you contribute, such that, and this is, of course, the leadership question, how do you architect culture or architect for flow, collective flow in particular, which, of course, the Navy SEALs do pretty well.
Yeah.
Because that's the kind of, this is the optimal performance space. And I feel like legacy systems do such a disservice to hardworking leaders, educators, and hardworking young people,
Yeah, it feels almost well, not almost, it feels unethical for me. It's unethical. It is so, if you've had an experience of flow and it's possible to teach kids how to design their environments and understand themselves well enough to create that at will, and you don't let that happen, it is wrong. It is immoral. And I've wondered about this, right? Because I wonder, it's one of those things you say, look, it's so simple. Why don't we just all agree and just change education all around the world? Today, we have the step-by-step, join the Flow Genome Project with Jimmy Whelan and Stephen Kotler. Use all the money you have that you waste on all these other useless professional development opportunities. Go do that, right? It seems easy, and yet I'm not going to be shocked if 5 years from now you and I have the same conversation and the same problems persist. So I wonder why, right? So I think it has to do with systems designed to protect themselves, as opposed to ask the question that may make them change. So it is better for the system if things remain as they are, because everything is falling into a place that makes sense for the system. That's one. But two, I think it has to do with the amount of suffering around the world, man. It's like, if people are suffering and can't eat or are worried about war, or don't have or health care, it's a little difficult for them to to pause that, to wonder about selflessness in doing anything. So I often criticize myself and others when it seems like we are operating from a perspective of, as long as we are not suffering, we're good. I really don't like that. So I'm always criticizing them, because I say not suffering should be the foundation. It's the baseline.
Absolutely.
The true goal should be to uplift from there. So I criticize that perspective a lot, because once again, I'm all about human flourishing, not the mere lack of suffering. However, I'm very personally aware of the difficulty of thinking past one day, past 1 month, past one opportunity, when you don't have access to healthcare or food or shelter. And that's another issue which it seems to me we can solve. But we have not. So I pause there.
Mate. So that's so powerful. I mean, I think it's the frame that is that really helps shape reality. I mean, this is back to our earlier question around consciousness. No, I fundamentally believe, and I think the quantum sciences are showing this, that none of us are actually experiencing the same reality. We're all experiencing our own version of it. And, I don't have a background in quantum physics, so I'll stop there in terms of my analysis of it. But I really think like this is what we're realizing, that the observer effect that's now empirically evidential, that this is what won the physics Nobel last year was non-local reality, which is to say, when it's only when there's a conscious observer that reality comes into existence. And that's a pretty profound insight that's challenging some classical physics big time. And so I wonder about the power of our framing, as you say, like the deficit view, or almost the pathological view from psychology, from economics, from whatever, is like, oh, you're sick, I'm going to remove the sickness. And that is it's important work, but it's clearly not expansive advice. It's not that the absence of sickness does not automatically create wellness, and it does not create thriving or thrivability or flourishing. And I just wonder about that. And I think sometimes we are just not nearly bold enough in our ambition within education systems, and hence the need for true transformation as opposed to reform or an improvement paradigm. We still need the learning sciences and improvement sciences, but I believe we need them fundamentally within a transformation paradigm. It's, it's not, let's just do what we've been doing a little bit better. It's, what's the frame of reference? What is the core purpose, la raison d'être, for this actual piece of our activity, of our contribution in a life that ends at some point, And so then what's ours to do? It's a real question that I reflect on all the time, Dido. It's like, what's mine to do? Because I feel like in that is agency, it's responsibility, it's contribution, and it's uniqueness. It's not just like, what am I jamming on, or like, what's my job? No, it's like, what's mine to do over the course of an arc of contribution, of a chapter in a school, or a chapter in a consultancy, or as an entrepreneur, or as a work life. Man, what do you think is yours to do? Because you haven't talked about your story. I've heard it from you on stage. It's a pretty profound story about what's yours to do and what you're doing right now in the world with, MindUP and beyond. But
yeah, I mean, that is that idea, like la raison d'être, like you said. What is that? I am fascinated with questions like that. I don't sleep if I'm not thinking about that, and that's why I cannot limit myself to, well, I'm not suffering today, so I'm good. No,
yeah,
that is not where it's at. So
yeah,
for me, having lived so I'm from Cameroon originally, right? So in West Africa, having lived in a place where I've seen people lack almost everything, and also having lived and worked in places where folks have way more than they need,
yeah, yeah,
I have found that there is a sweet spot for everyone where they can do what they enjoy doing, so pursue purpose, and also help other people at the same time while expanding themselves. It's almost like it's a healthy addiction to growth, healthy addiction to self-discovery, healthy addiction to uplifting.
yeah,
And that's what I'm all about. And I believe that everybody can do that in their own ways. So we talked about flow earlier. I'm not what you would call a traditional artist. I'll get into flow by speaking in front of people, by having uncomfortable, expanding conversations. And I believe that everybody can find that. So for me, I think my raison d'être, right? The way why I exist is to be on this journey to learn so much about myself. And I always start with me. Because do you know how complicated it is to understand yourself? I mean, it is nearly impossible for you to actually know yourself. So
yeah.
let's not even start to think about other people or being a couple. You understanding your partner. Let's not even go there. understand you. And I'm obsessed with learning about how I function and then challenging myself to learn more, grow more, expand more. And I want to share that message, man, because I've seen
Mm.
that everybody, from just being a human being,
Yeah.
everybody who's listening, you have what it takes within you to live a life that is slightly more uplifting than the life you lived yesterday. You have
Ah,
everything in you right now to live the life today that is slightly more empowering, slightly more exhilarating, slightly more exhilarating. I'm going to stick to that word than it was yesterday. You have it now. No matter what your actual circumstances are, you have something now. And I'm obsessed with sharing that with folks, man, everywhere.
oh, wow. Dude, that's so good. That's really great. That's really great. Because I sometimes am a little cautious about even kind of the field of pos psych and this idea that, you know, you self-improve. I love some, and the reason for that is because of the privilege element that comes from that sometimes. You know, it's kind of like someone that's struggling and suffering just to get by. If you give them a tool, which is, I'll just think a little bit, think with gratitude, it, you know, it doesn't necessarily solve the underlying social or economic challenge, but it seemingly does do something to the person's level of subjective well-being. Can you talk? You know, I'm in Australia, but you're in the US. You're from Cameroon. Like, you've seen
Yeah,
the world. We've both seen the world, and so is this something that, you know, all is like universal for all human
it
beings? Is this
is.
just the path of life? You know?
Yeah, it's the path of life, man. Look, so I'm from Cameroon. I lived in Cameroon. I lived in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. I lived in Lagos in Nigeria. I've lived in uh, Cotonou, Benin. I've lived
Wow.
in Accra, Ghana. Um, and I've seen some things, man. I've experienced some things, and I can tell you this once again: obsessing over controlling the things that happen to you, that's not going to be very useful. And I can give you all the perspective, right? So I left Cameroon because the armed robbers came to my family's home like three times in the span of 6 months. Like I've slept hungry. I've experienced everything that when you think about extreme poverty, I understand that. Um, but I tell you something, me having the knowledge that I have some agency
Yes.
over what my experience get to be, it is powerful, man. I'll give you an example that may resonate or not, but I'm still going to give it because it comes to my mind. Okay, so
Yeah.
look, we when I was a student in middle school, high school, Cameroon, Benin, whatnot, the teachers were mean, man. They were so mean. It was so bad. They were, and you had to respect them like they were the king. So when they walked in class, you're supposed to like stand up to show respect, and you don't sit down until they look at you and give you a disrespectful, condescending look. Um, that says now you can sit down. Then you sit down. So I couldn't
Damn,
stand those
man.
guys. So and they're physically abusive. They slap you around. And I can say it smiling now, but it was not fun back then. But I tell you something.
Mm.
When the teacher came and perhaps punished me or or maybe even hit me, right? Smack
Yeah.
me or whatnot. And I can tell that they expected me to crumble. And I did not crumble. And I saw the look in their face that did something to me. And where
Mm.
I'm getting with that is
Mm.
seeing that I couldn't control what they were doing to me, but I had worked something internally where I was not going to give them the satisfaction to see the result they expected. That made me feel like I had control, although I was maybe a 12-year-old who felt like I don't control anything, but just controlling how I responded to
Yeah.
this abuse was empowering. And there's something about the brain, man. When you set up any goal at all, and you achieve it, it tells you that you got it. You can do more. So
Mm.
something as simple as I am going to decide that the corruption around me, the poverty around me has caused and will continue to cause damage, that's for sure. However, I would choose one thing within me that I have control over. I will keep my humility. I will keep my pride. I will make it a point to smile at someone.
Mm.
I will make it a point to still comfort someone who's next to me, no matter what it is. You set that goal. And
Yeah.
if you achieve that goal, your brain rewards you, man. And while you can't change your circumstances, and even if you might die tomorrow, literally, you will have lived a better life for having had agency during that miserable life. And I know this firsthand because, once again, the power of knowing that I get to control something, I get to
Yeah.
set one goal. It's one step closer to I get to live the life that I want. And
Mm.
anybody can have that.
Wow. Thank you, Dido. Man, that's now I've got the goosebumps, bro. That that just really lands. I think it really lands. I mean, this piece on, I don't think it's like agency isn't given to you, even though there is power dynamics that we talk about, and in co-design or in schools, we think about student voice, choice, agency. Yeah, we'll give the students, no, it's kind of like a remembered agency. It's like this, it's always within us. And this, I mean, as you were talking, I was thinking about Viktor Frankl's work with
Yeah.
logotherapy and A Man's Search for
Yep.
Meaning, which is one of the best books I've
Yep.
ever read, really impacted me. That space between stimulus and response. And actually, that's choice, that's freedom, that's agency, is to choose my response, even in the moment where you have a teacher standing over you, physically abusing you.
Yeah.
And realizing that power, you have a sovereignty that we give away all the time.
Yeah.
Every time, even like, I think and this is the piece on the brain I'd love you to speak to as well. Like, we give it away for kind of external dopamine, this external loops, which is like some of the extractive social media technologies, for example, which is, we're just kind of looping in these ways that it's really away from, and you wake up after, I don't know, an hour of being in, what do you call it, doom scroll, right? And you're like,
Yeah.
oh, you've just kind of handed over your consciousness, your agency to some often, big tech platform. You know what I mean? Like that's advertising
Yeah.
to you and making money off your attention. So this is why the transformation piece has to be like this. Agency really for us is is a central organizing principle of a human-centered organization, education system, school, company. It's like, what's yours to do? Like uniquely, like where's your gift and how do you contribute that back to the collective? I'm really, it just really resonates with me, dude. This discipline, like the role of discipline, internal discipline.
Yep.
Like, yep, I know that I have everything within me, but this is how I choose to be, to act, to create. And I think you think about the
Yes.
great leaders and the great entrepreneurs, that level of discipline is kind of, what do you, man, when we talk about transformation in the school space, like how does that become the organizing principle for education?
So I start with money, man. Money is this could be a whole podcast on money. Money, this is bad news, man, because follow the money, right?
Yeah.
It's I don't even know what to tell you because I have met individual school leaders who are amazing, who want to do the right thing,
Yeah.
and yet they are part of this system. I don't know. That's why I admire anybody who starts their own thing. There's something about that entrepreneurial spirit of saying, maybe I can't change the system from within the system. Maybe I have to do something system adjacent and see if I can
Mm,
kind of laterally,
yeah.
laterally kind of stick something in there. I don't know, man, because I am not convinced that the system, as robust as it is of education, will change unless it collapses. And I cannot wish for an intentional collapse. However, I am reminded that not too long ago, with COVID, everything collapsing
Yeah.
led to a huge awakening
Yeah.
um, in consciousness in education and elsewhere. I'm also reminded that most people who are successful either because they are obsessed with growing and developing or because they are scared of something. And so you're either running away from or you're running towards. And I'm not sure that the running towards
Mm,
is getting us what we want. I don't want to run away from anything. I don't want
yeah.
us to collapse for us to say let's change it.
Yeah.
But I have to say, man, it's tough to have these conversations and going to a school tomorrow
Yeah.
and realize that they are at step 0.001 of what we're discussing. So I guess in this, I'm thinking out loud. My
Mm,
answer is we need to be married to the infinite game and know that we are doing the right thing. And we should not be obsessed with the short-term dopamine experience pleasure of seeing our goals being realized today or tomorrow. We should be comfortable doing this work and doing the right thing, knowing that we will likely not be alive when the actual results appear, and we need to be okay with that. Because if we don't do that, then we're too focused on what seems to be short-term goals, but it's all an illusion. So I think that's what it is, man. I think it's
yeah.
like health and wellness. You could take the diet pill or
Uh-huh.
the latest fad, or you can do the work and just trust that it may take 40 years, but it is what it is.
Bro, I love that so much. I'm glad you brought up the infinite game. You know, one of my life defining quotes from Naval, who's an investor, angel investor, and kind of really spiritual guy, says it's about long-term games with long-term people. But of course,
Yeah.
those games are long-term. They're infinite games. They're not games that are even winnable. It's not about
Hmm.
like, Dido, you're a very fit man. Do you know what I mean? Like, sort of think of fit.
Hmm.
It's not about getting fit. It's about being fit. It's a state
Yeah.
that we cultivate. Like you said, man, it's over 40 years of being fit, not like, oh, I got fit in the gym in January and then I'm reverting back to things that don't honor health and well-being and like performance and learning and achievement and growth and all the things. Man, that's so profound. Damn, this has been a great chat. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Of course,
Loved
man.
it,
This
man.
my pleasure. And I'll say this for anybody who's listening and how we opened,
Yeah.
this was flow. This was flow. I
A
I
thousand
felt
percent.
the sense of selflessness the whole time. I did not see the time go through, so timelessness. There was no effort into this. And it was a download of information from some sort of other galaxy. Like I could confidently say that it seemed as if somebody else was remote controlling and dropping the gems here and then drop the quote here and then like give the idea here. This was flow.
Yeah.
And we have in common that we cherish every experience of flow that we get, but we're not satisfied if others don't have similar experiences in their own ways. So please take this conversation and try to study yourself. What are those things that make you feel in flow? And please try to cultivate them as often as possible, even if it's like 1 minute a day. Um, you would thank yourself for it.
Bro, that's so good, man. Do you know, I don't think people will know this, but we had like two questions, which was like, what are you learning? And then what's transformation? The rest is totally just flow. And I mean, and you're so right. I'm like, damn. Um, really wonderful, mate, to drop in with you. I think that's I like that terminology. Like kind of you drop into an experience with another
Mhm.
this collective, and this is the whole collective flow piece that again we're all
Yeah.
experiencing. Dido, this is definitely part one, or maybe it's part two of many parts to come. Thank you,
Yep.
man. Thanks for joining us throughout this beautiful conversation, and just for being like an incredibly abundant person, energetically, like a generous, your generosity. And I saw it the first time I met you, and I just really want to honor you for it. Honor for the life you're
My pleasure.
choosing to live, and the work that you continue to do.
My pleasure, man. This is once again for anyone listening, this is our second true conversation. And you could tell that we could do it forever. And I don't take it for granted, man. I'm super,
Neither
super
do
stoked that
I.
we did this. And one shout out to technology because I mean, South Florida, you in Australia, and we're able to do this live. And I don't take it for granted that we have the technology today to allow this to happen. And I'm grateful, man. I'm grateful.
Right. So good. Thanks. Thanks for joining us on the Learning Future podcast. If you want to find out more about Dido and the work that MindUP are doing, check out some of the links in the show notes. And in the meantime, keep finding that flow.